girls, and welcome to Season 3 of the Hey Girl podcast with my mom, Bethany Needham. Each week, guests will share their amazing stories of following Jesus on all kinds of journeys. I hope their stories inspire you to run your race in your place. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey listeners, and welcome back to another week of the Hey Girl podcast. It's been a while since I've paused just long enough to thank you for listening. It's kind of, surreal when I stop to think about the fact that there are people out there that have been listening week after week, all the way from season 1 into season 3. It's crazy. And all of you who have taken time to write in notes and just letting us know how these different stories are impacting you, I want to thank you. I know you're already giving of your time to listen, and then to take those extra moments to encourage us here in the work that we're doing. It has just meant so much. This has been a crazy season. I feel like that's been pretty much every season recently, but in particular right now, I think I described it to a friend the other day, like I'm kind of trying to keep my head above water, but most of the time it feels like it's below the water. I don't know if you've ever had those seasons, but man, that's just where we're at right now. So here's the thing. This week's episode, I get to introduce you to a friend, Stephanie, who I actually got to meet through Berea. Her and her husband led worship for the ladies' retreats last fall. And oh my goodness, first of all, as worship leaders, her and her husband were phenomenal. Secondly, when they shared their story and the testimony of where God has brought them, I'm not sure that there was a dry eye in the house. It's not only powerful, but at least for me, not just when I heard it then, but even listening back to this episode is such a powerful reminder that of God's faithfulness through everything when our stories don't map out the way that we thought that they would or planned for them, or it's not necessarily the storybooks we remember reading when we were younger, and yet God shows up and does a powerful, powerful work. I love this episode. I love Stephanie, her courage in sharing her story. I appreciate so much her and her husband's ministry and the fact that they're willing to speak about this in all the different places that they go. Divorce is a tough issue to talk about, especially in Christian circles, and it's part of their story, and I don't want to give any spoilers of all the work that God does and the different parts, so I'm not going to give it all away, but I did want to let you know that if you have tissues, you probably want to grab them. If topics of divorce or different things, if these are things that obviously are hard topics for you, just be aware that we are going to talk about them in today's episode. So here's the thing, grab your tissues, grab a warm blanket, whatever it is when you're listening to this. Maybe you're driving in your minivan with your kiddos. Whatever it is, I just pray today that this is a story that once again encourages you and is a powerful reminder that we serve an incredible and faithful God. Enjoy this episode with my new friend, Stephanie. Okay, listeners, I am so excited because I'm about to introduce you to a young woman I just met a week ago here at Berea. We're doing an offsite recording. It's been a while since I've done an offsite recording, so welcome to my offsite recording, Stephanie.
Thank you. This wonderful location here.
I know, right? We are actually at beautiful Berea, but we are literally locked in this closet office that's feeling a little bit like a dungeon this moment, but it's hard to find quiet spaces when you're at a ladies' retreat.
So true.
But we are here, Stephanie. I want to say how I met you, but basically I was introduced because you and your husband are leading worship for the ladies' retreats this fall, and first of all, you guys have done a phenomenal job. And I'm the wife of a worship leader, so I feel like I'm maybe extra judgmental is mean, but it's probably true.
I get it. I get it.
You're more cynical but you guys have just been absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
We've loved having you. And you stood up and shared in one of your sessions a little bit about your story. I love that your husband kind of shared it, and then you're like, so he just kind of dropped a bomb right there. And because obviously you guys have walked quite a journey together, so I thought it would be really good to take the time, invite you onto Hey Girl, and let you, not just necessarily that piece of your story, but tell a little bit of your story.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a fun little added bonus to the weekend.
I know, you're so welcome.
Oh, man, where to start? Well, first of all, I have to say that we found out that we grew up like 3 minutes apart from each other in Tennessee, but we met for the first time here in New Hampshire.
It took all these years, and we have finally, which is so crazy.
Literally could have walked to each other's house besides kids.
Except I was so little, that would have been dangerous. But yeah, and a lot of people don't even know I ever lived in Tennessee. But by the way, spoiler alert, when I was younger, I lived in Tennessee. And the craziness, it's not like it's a tiny state, like that we were that close at the same time, too.
Both little kids.
That's kind of God's sense of humor. They were like, and now we met New Hampshire.
But man, what a journey the Lord has taken me and Chris on. We met in high school. So I was 16, he was 17. We met through church. We went to a big mega church, good old Bible Belt. There's lots of those around. We met at the training for a mission trip. So we were going on a youth mission trip to Philadelphia and just hit it off super fast, had a great time together. You know, who doesn't want to start a friendship or relationship on a mission trip? Hello, there to serve the Lord. Hopefully.
For real. Every teenager just signed up for a mission trip.
So I did, and Chris always loves to tell this part of the story, but he's not here. But I had a boyfriend at the time, as serious as a 16-year-old can be in like a 2-month relationship, you know. So as Chris very lovingly says it, God took care of that. We started dating a little bit after the mission trip and just fell in love super fast, did everything together. He immediately was welcomed into my family. He's an only child. It's him and his mom his whole life, just the two of them. And so I have an older brother and parents that are very involved and great, loving home. So I think the first week we got back from the mission trip, he came every Sunday to Sunday lunch at my family's house. And so, yeah, it was everything that you dream of as a senior in high school together. Yeah. And he was talking to my parents literally, I think, 3 or 4 months into our dating relationship that he wanted to get married.
Wow.
And somehow my parents didn't, like, kick him out.
Because you were 16, right? Or
I just turned 17.
17.
So, yeah. So I turned 17, and, yeah, we were serious about it.
Yeah.
So now we weren't totally dumb. So we did go to college. We went to the same college at MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great school.
I'm just kidding.
There aren't any real good sports. Well, okay, I'm not going to say anything bad about the school. We're just not huge sports people, so.
Okay, I gotcha.
You know, it is what it is. We do music.
And you do that very well.
So thank you.
You don't need to apologize for sports. We have enough people that do sports.
That's true. Well, so we were at MTSU together, and about, I guess, into our freshman year, we figured out, we know we want to get married. What is the holdup if we know that's what we want to do? Mm-hmm. We financially were able to afford it with scholarships and things, and so we're like, hey, why not? Let's just go for it. So we got married between our sophomore and junior year in college, and as all 19 and 20-year-olds are, when they get married, they know everything about marriage, right?
They should write the books.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we were, from the outside, I think the epitome, look at that Christian couple. They're just doing it. You know, they're leading worship. We were leading worship for our youth group, a college group. He was on staff part-time at church. He was leading 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. Literally had the like Britney Spears microphone, choreographed dances. That was him. And I was on staff with children's ministry and thought we had it all together. And as somebody who myself am very logical, mentally process everything, my life was all lined up the way it was supposed to be, and I was going to school for education. I was going to be a teacher, and life was going to be great. And in college, Chris, unbeknownst to me, started doubting God and his goodness and his faithfulness, and he was in the recording industry program at school. And if you know anything about the music business, it's very wholesome industry to be a part of. No, not at all. Not at all. So along with his doubting, he was in situations and environments that were not, there's the rivals.
I know, right? I feel like we just pretend like people are not shooting behind us right now.
Oh, I love it.
Listen, Berea does women's retreats right, because I know for me as a mom, sometimes you just need to be handed a rifle.
You know?
And just given some space.
I feel
so
that.
Those women are really like experiencing Jesus right now.
I'm sure there's some great metaphors about Christianity.
Absolutely. So he began doubting God. We'll go there.
Yeah. So along with his doubts with his faith, being in the recording industry with really not great company, he also always has had a love for science. And being at a university, a very secular university, there is a worldview that comes along with that. And he was just eating out of the palm of the enemy's hand. You know, these views in science that don't leave room for God. So that was all this culmination of things that were happening internally in his heart and his mind, and he dealt with all of that in isolation. So he didn't let me in. I had no idea. He didn't let our family in, our church, anything, because for him, you know, worship leaders don't do that, right? Like, they don't doubt their faith. They don't engage in drinking and drugs and things that's just not a thing. So obviously that life that he was living in private, that can't go on forever. And for him, have you done any Enneagram stuff?
Yes.
Okay, so we love the Enneagram. He is a 4-wing 3, so deep feeler, always has this ongoing, like, not good enough, and also authenticity is a huge thing for him. So for him to be living this very inauthentic kind of double life was really tearing him apart. And so hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
And I can look back and I can see little things, but I can be optimistic, I think, to a point of being naive and not digging in, just kind of excusing it. Like, oh, you know, we're in school, we both work, full-time school, we just end doing ministry. Like, we just, it's just a hard season. Everybody says marriage is hard. Sure. Like,
yeah,
we'll just say that's sad and we'll start figuring it out.
You say hindsight, so obviously you can look back at that now, but what did those little things look like looking back that you can see?
Yeah, I think spiritually I could see a little bit of a pulling away, like him not wanting to pray, or even just in like a group setting where I would expect like, oh, like he normally would volunteer to lead the prayer or something, you know, in our small group. He shied away from it a lot. And just, you can sense it with your spouse. Like, there was just this emotional disconnect that I could excuse as busyness, and we just haven't connected. But really, it was deeper than that. And it even got to a point, and even physically, I mean, you can tell, like, intimacy was different. And so it got to a point where, and this was, I guess we've been married about 3 years. We're out of college, so both working full-time jobs. And I could tell there was something, and it was to the point where, and communication was not great at the time. We really butted heads a lot. We both can be pretty stubborn, pretty strong-willed. He's an only child. I'm the youngest, but I'm the first daughter in our family, so I have a lot of the firstborn tendencies too. So we just weren't clicking. Another big red flag that I saw but I didn't do anything about was the company that he was keeping. His friends, I was never comfortable with some of the people he was with. He was working, I think, at a restaurant or something, and he would get invited to parties, or hey, they're gonna hang out after work. And I was a first year teacher at the time, first grade teacher. So any educators out there, you know, your first year, you are just drowning. You just kind of survive, and you're there all day and all night. So for me, I would come home exhausted. I'd go to bed, and he would go out. And there were some friends that I have weird feelings about, and I couldn't even put my finger on it sometimes. But I really think that's the Lord kind of letting you know, like, there's something there in my spirit. I could sense something wasn't good with some of the friends that he had, and it was always met with an argument. And so I didn't dig into it. So about a month before my life exploded, I mean, I was to the point where I was like, okay, I know we need to talk. We need to connect and figure this out, but I don't even know how to approach it because we're just not communicating. Even to the point where I was like, maybe I'll just sit down and write it out. Like, I'll write a letter or something and give it to him so that it will come across in a way I want it to.
Yeah.
Probably just a few days before I actually did it. It was January 21st, 2010. He sat me down. We were on our way to my parents' house for dinner. Weird choice on his on his behalf, but no exaggeration. He sat me down and he said, I don't want to be married anymore, and I don't believe in God anymore. And out of nowhere, for me, for him, he had been planning this for, months and months. But for me, it was like getting smacked in the face with, a freight train is what it felt like. Because like I mentioned, I like my plans. I like having my ducks in a row. And this was so out of left field for me, and anything I ever imagined would happen in my life, my good Christian girl, make the right choices life.
Yeah.
That I could not even compute what was happening in my head. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't figure it out. And I think Chris will say, I don't remember even what I said initially, but he'll say that I didn't say anything for almost half an hour in the midst of that because I didn't even know how to talk, how to say anything. I tried to understand and ask him questions and just was in such utter shock that I just couldn't even function. So I don't know if he expected us to go to dinner after that. I don't know. But I think part of it was he knew how close our family unit was, and he thought, like, hey, they can be a part of this and help and whatever. I don't know.
I'm just having this, image of, okay, good talk. Let's go to dinner.
Right?
Like, what?
So I think I told him, I was like, I can't go anywhere. They lived a whole 3 minutes away. But I was like, you can go and tell them because I can't even get the words out. So he ended up going to my parents, and my brother and sister-in-law were there, and told them, and they ended up coming back to me at the house. But
okay, I have to ask in that because I'm so in the moment with you. I feel like I'm like that. You're like that person in the movie looking in and watching the scene unfold. Do you even, maybe you don't remember, but what are those moments like when he leaves to go tell your parents, you're sitting there. I feel like this is the moment it starts to sink in, like, because there must have been a pretty good gap of time before your family arrived. Yeah. So where are you at in that moment?
Gosh, all I remember, honestly, is just being curled up in my bed, and my dog was, like, laying on me. Because dogs know these things,
dogs
right?
Are the best.
So I don't even remember if I was crying. I don't even know. I just was in such shock. And so from there, I fought for a marriage for a while. We were still, living in the same house, and he was very cordial about everything, as weird as that is. He never wanted, it sounds silly, but he never wanted to hurt me. He didn't want to hurt my family. He really was a son to my parents, but he knew what he wanted, and he just had in his mind, he had to hurt people along the way. But he met with, I think, one of our pastors. He met with some people in our small group. We thankfully had just gotten involved with a really wonderful small group. They were the first people. I think I sent out a mass group email to our small group right after it happened, just asking for prayer. And so the guys in the group were seeking after him, and he talked and he met with people, but he had made up his mind.
I guess I'm wondering, and obviously he's with you a lot when you share this. We kicked him out this time, though. Sorry, Bill. But for him was, because the decision to walk away from faith, he said, like, I don't want to be married and I don't believe in God, was was the I don't want to be married connected to, like, to be married to you as a believer felt like I can't live with a Christian wife and then also have all of these things. So he connected your marriage.
He did. And it was even more than that. So for him, I think where it started with the doubts, and there was drug use and alcohol, which I didn't know about either.
Yeah.
The way that he tells it is that it really, all of those things were idols for him, just trying to fill this void.
Right.
And me being his wife, God being who he is, that was accountability that he didn't want.
Yeah.
And so he justified a lot of things to be able to do what he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Because with me around, he couldn't go and do what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
With God, like, he couldn't go and do what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
So, but he even said, he actually told me the words. He said, even if I believe in God again, we just don't really work. Like, we're too different. Talking about Enneagram, like any personality test, we are total opposites in everything. Everything. And at the time, back then, like, that was hard. Yeah. Like, we didn't understand how to use our differences for good. It definitely was connected in a way for him that kind of excused everything and made sense. So I fought for our marriage for a while, and even with him meeting with everybody, it's like, hey, great, but I'm still doing this.
Yeah.
We had some conversations about theology and things, just trying to understand, like, what is it? Like, how could this change? God has been so faithful to us throughout our whole, both of our lives, and he couldn't trust the validity of the Bible, and this didn't make sense, and blah, 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 all of that. And it's valid doubts. I think, and we will say from stage, like, doubting is not a bad thing. Like, that's, especially as young people, and for him, it was very much, we're from the South, Christianity is cultural. Like, that's just, you may only go on Sunday, you may not go at all, but you still claim you're a Christian. But to take it to the next step of, like, is this faith really your own? Yeah. And that's something I think, especially us that do grow up in the church, you have to get to a point in your young adulthood to really claim it as yours, not just what your parents have taught you. Yeah. And so that can go one of two ways. And for him, the doubts and figuring it out kind of pushed him the opposite way. After about a month of struggling and wrestling back and forth, and me realizing, this is not helping, it's not benefiting anything for us to keep doing this and just making circles around the same thing, I ended up moving in with my parents. And it's so silly, but, like, we had conversations about, he was like, well, like, you can have all the stuff, I'll stay in the house, because we had bought a house. And it's like, I don't want the house, for one, so sure. So, like, and we had 2 dogs, like, the dogs are with me, and, like, I cannot believe I'm having these conversations with my best friend, who I thought I was going to be with my whole life. Yeah. And so I moved in with my parents about a month after that initial conversation, and still trying to figure out what in the world is happening, going through the gamut of emotions that you do with any tragedy. There's the shock and the disbelief and the depression and anxiety and all of it. And about that same time, about a month after, our church back home had a women's retreat. So I love women's retreats. I love that we get to be a part of this. There's just something so sacred, I think, about women getting together. And the theme, I had no idea, but the theme was finding joy in suffering and trials. And as soon as I knew what it was about, I was like, all right, Lord, you have some things to teach me this weekend, because I don't understand how to do that. And so by the end of the weekend, I had this handout that they had given us at one of the sessions of just lists of scriptures of that. Like, some of them were cries of David, where the Psalms were so life-giving for me, because I love the ones where, like, the first half is him just talking about and being like, they want to kill me and life is horrible, but he's like, but God, you are still good, you are still faithful. And that's what I needed to hear, because I didn't know. You know, I believed that God was there through it, but I didn't know why I was going through it. And so I'd written and scribbled all around and wrote, I'd look up different translations and word meanings, and it was life-giving for me to have that and to share with some of the women that were there, because a lot of people didn't know what was going on. And I wasn't, before everything happened, I did not have a lot of close girl friends. I grew up with an older brother. I was friends with a lot of his friends, so I didn't have a good community of women around me that I really let in. And so that was kind of the beginning of a lot of that and of some relationships. And so from there, it was me making the choice of, am I going to sit in this funk? Am I going to play the victim of the girl who, in my mind, made all the right choices, air quotes, the good girl, who, because I'm an Enneagram 1, anybody who knows Enneagram, where we're very principled, we'd like to make the best and right choice, but that can lead to a lot of pride. And I had a lot of pride and self-reliance in my heart that I wasn't even aware of. I thought I was just doing the right thing, but it became sin that I was so prideful I couldn't even see it. And so that season became a refining thing for me, where just oh gosh, my life verse in that season was James 1, where it says, consider it joy when you go through trials, because God, I'm summarizing, but God will use that in your life. And so I decided, okay, if this is my life now. I don't know where it's going. I don't know what's happening with Chris. I don't know if he's ever coming back. And I have to figure out how to move forward with this. I'm still going to pray for him. I still have hope for some kind of redemption. I don't know what that'll look like, but I choose to believe that God is in it, and he has a purpose for my pain and my suffering. And so fast forward a little bit, this is so unlike me at the time, but I looked up there was a young adult group in the area, a different church. It was kind of a sister church of where we went. It was bigger, and they had a young adult group. Yeah. Because I was well, I feel weird going to our married couple small group now. I need to find some place to plug in. And it was kind of nice to feel anonymous a little bit at a different church, and ended up signing up to go to Nigeria that summer, which is something Chris and I always wanted to do together. Let's go to Africa. They were going to be doing a VBS and all this, and as a teacher, I was it's perfect. So, but in the midst of that time, I got served divorce papers, and we had been talking on and off. Nothing, he was never mean, he was never demanding or anything, but it was still it's still there. It's still there. And I think the worst thing, and it's just in Tennessee, it's just something they have to do, but I got a restraining order in the mail. Oh. And I knew it wasn't a malicious thing. I knew that Chris probably hated that I even got it, but the fact that that had to happen legally was a shot to the chest, knocked the breath out of me a little bit. And so once that had happened, and I knew that he wanted me to meet with the lawyer to sign the papers, I still didn't fully know what I was going to do. I had, crazy enough, she became my best friend through all of this process, but a year before everything with Chris, her husband did almost the exact same thing. As a young 20-something, he was a worship leader, they served the Lord together, and he left. And so I watched her walk through that process, and I watched her fight the divorce, and I saw how much pain and difficulty came from that. I felt a release from the Lord to sign. And before I signed, I wanted Chris to know fully how I felt. And so I wrote him an email. We hadn't really been talking at all. And I basically just laid it out, and I said, I love you. I still want to fight for this, for us. I'm willing to work this out. I don't know what it would look like, but I want this to work. but if this is your decision, like if you know without a doubt this is what you want to do, I'm going to submit to that and I'll sign these papers. And that's what he wanted. So I signed the papers that spring, and then it was final, by the beginning of the summer, I think. So from there, I was figuring out my new normal of what life was. And like I said, went to Nigeria and completely rocked my world and all the, ruined me in all the best ways.
Yes.
And was a really tangible step for me to do something like that with a bunch of strangers. I didn't know anybody, and that was so out of my comfort zone. But seeing what God did just on that trip was this taste of, okay, so this is what it means. Like this, when I step out and do something I'm not comfortable with, that I don't want to do, like, God, you're going to meet me there. You have a path for me, and I'm okay not knowing what it is. Because I think that the hardest thing through the whole process, obviously other than, losing your best friend and all of that, was the lack of control that I had over all of it, which I figured out. You figure out very quickly what you value when you lose it. And so for me, losing the control over my life and where it was going, it was like free falling, and you can't grab anything.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge shift, where growing up in the church and believing in God's goodness, I would always say, yes, Lord, like anything you want, my life is yours. But still, I'm very meticulous in planning out what I want. And I, in my pretty easy life, had never fully leaned on him for everything, because I feel like I didn't have to. And so in that season, I couldn't make it through some days without him, because I just didn't have the strength. So by the end of that summer, I felt like I was finally in a place of, I don't know what's going to happen with Chris. I don't even think at the time I was still hopeful that he would come back. I believed that he would come back to the Lord. I just felt like the seeds that had been planted in his life, I felt like he would come back. I didn't know when. It could have been years, but I didn't think I would be involved at all. So I ended up with my friend who a year before had gotten divorced. We signed up for a divorce care class at a local church. And I just wanted to be smart and not assume I know everything like I had historically done in my past. Just, you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And what can happen as a result of trauma, going through a trauma of divorce. And a couple months into the divorce care class, this was August, I guess, I was hearing from Chris's mom. We still talked periodically, and about some things going on with him that he was starting. She was like, just pray for him. He's starting to have some things going on. I was like, okay, fine. Like, I'll still pray for him. I don't know what that means, but sure. And honestly, I think my parents and his mom were still holding on to the hope of us reconciling beyond when I was even doing it. And some of it, I think, for me was almost self-preservation. Like I didn't want to hang on to this for years just to be disappointed. Yeah. So again, very logical. I'm like, okay, I can do that and like kind of waste that part of my brain. Or, I mean, obviously I'm still mourning it. It's still a loss, but I just wanted to figure out my life.
Yeah.
So I was hearing about some things going on, and I could say that I'd forgiven him because I saw his thought process. I could understand where he was coming from. But obviously that doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it to where I'm okay with it. But still, I just, my heart hurt for him in the place that he was in. So fast forward a little bit more, and he actually contacted my parents to get together and talk. So I knew something was happening at that point because he hadn't talked to my parents in a while. And so he met with them.
Were you feeling like, what's with him in awkward conversations with my parents?
Yes. I mean, I knew that something had changed, because
Right.
otherwise he wouldn't have, like, why would he talk to my parent? I had known that he had started another relationship after the divorce, and so I think that was another reason where I was like, I'm not holding on to this. Like, he's already moving on.
Yeah.
Whatever. Of course, I have my own thoughts about all of that, but my mom called me after they met, and she said, and I knew they were going to meet, but she was like, it went really well. I think, he wants to talk to you if you're open to it. And she said, I think it'd be really good for you to hear from him. So I was like, sure, why not?
Yeah.
Let's go for it. So,
I've been to Nigeria.
Right?
I'm a wild woman.
I can handle anything. I lived a whole 3 minutes away from my parents. I told you I'm stubborn. I bought a new house in the same neighborhood as our old house because I love that location so much.
It's hard to find a good location.
It's a big neighborhood. I was like, if I don't want to drive by his house, I don't have to. There's like another entrance around the neighborhood. So I was at home. So he came by, and I didn't let him in the house. Not like maliciously, but I mean, that house had become my haven. And I mean, my family, we wrote scripture all over the floor. Like, that was my safe place. And so we ended up walking the neighborhood just for a couple of hours, swapping stories of what God had done in both of our lives that summer. So I found out in the midst of all of that, he confessed everything to me in those 2 hours about the drugs, about when the doubts had started, about the relationships that he had been in, and what had ultimately led him to turning back to God, which I had kind of gotten hints about that from his mom. But basically, it's so interesting telling his side of the story because we always do this together.
She's not gossiping. He's given her permission, so we're clear.
I'm not putting words in his mouth. He literally says these words all the time. Once he left, he saw leaving as his way to freedom, to live this life that he thought he wanted, because he felt trapped being married, having this God that he was accountable to. So he was ready to go and live this life and live in authenticity that he craves out in the light. What he was doing in the dark, he could do in the light. And one thing that he says a lot from stage is that freedom to sin is not freedom. Like, that's bondage, that's slavery. And he found that out very quickly. I mean, he jumped right into a relationship, a couple different things, and ultimately one of them just exploded or imploded, however you want to see it, but really, really horribly, to the point where he was waking up in cold sweats and having depression and anxiety that he had never, ever dealt with before. He's a very, happy-go-lucky guy, and so that was kind of the wake-up call for him. And there's a much longer story inside to what he went through, but that particular relationship is what really took the veil off of his eyes to see what he had become and what happens when we, in our human nature, take the reins of our lives. And so that kind of began the turn for him of seeing God and seeing his presence in his life. And I love how he talks about, through his story, he's very much the prodigal son. If you're familiar with that story, he was the son who ran off, squandered the riches of the father, just straight into sin. And the father in the story, he didn't wait till he was cleaned up. He didn't wait until the son earned his love back. He immediately was there, wrapped his arms around him in all of his filth. And that's what God did for Chris. He didn't wait for Chris to clean up and fix it all and figure it all out. And so God was just showing up in so many ways over and over and over again, in ways that he couldn't deny. That's God. The person calling me at this moment and saying that's God. That's what I need to hear. So on our walk, he's showing me this whole list on his phone of all these ways that God had been just revealing himself to him and what he'd been learning. And I was telling him about my trip to Nigeria and all of that. And by the end of the conversation, he shared with me that he felt more strongly than anything that God had ever spoken to him about, that we should be together again. And my initial response was not, okay, sure.
Fair enough.
Right? It was a weirdly beautiful time with him that night, but I needed to know that this wasn't him just realizing I'm miserable and I need to fix this.
Yeah.
I needed to know that it was a true heart change. And I had seen Jesus in him more than I'd ever seen that night. But forgiveness had been given, but trust is something it takes time and actions to be rebuilt, as it should. Like I would tell anybody, trust takes time. So we decided to take a few months to separately really pray and seek the Lord's will and involve our community, which is something we just didn't do. We didn't do that the first time. We didn't let people in to our junk. They could see us from stage. Oh, they're great. But community is so important. It's so vital to share the highs and the lows. And so we told our pastors, our family and friends. We did counseling separately. And after a few months came together with the same counselor, and everybody was in agreement that if this is what we wanted to do, that we should go for it. And we believe that God is a God of redemption. So we decided to try for it. So with the intention of total remarriage, reconciliation. And so we went on our first date in November of that same year, in 2010. And were remarried the following February in 2011. So it was a little over a year after everything blew apart. So we celebrate 2 anniversaries every year. So we celebrated our 7th anniversary in February of this year, and then celebrated our 12th a few months later in May.
That's amazing. And it's not just the 2 of you anymore.
Oh man, we have a daily reminder of God's redemption in our lives. We have 2 kiddos who we are just crazy about. We have a 5-year-old named Asher and a 3-year-old daughter, Nora.
A question that comes to mind, because I love how you talked about trust just takes time. And I think sometimes it can be easy to think about trust like, well, I don't want to step into this until I fully trust. And many, many times in my life, God has brought me to this place of it's not about fully there's kind of that journey, and then there's a point where God's like, now you just have to trust me. It's not about
it takes faith for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I am assuming that was probably part of from even getting married to, because again, I've not walked through this, but I guess, did you find it difficult those first years of marriage, kind of all of those anniversaries happening? There's beauty in it, and then there's kind of that your flesh wanting to be okay, this is the 3-year mark again.
Right. And it was not a seamless transition into a second marriage. And I think one of the best things that our counselor told us, kind of as an exercise to do, he gave us a period of time. And he said, look, I can't remember exactly what it is, but let's just say 3 months. He was like, for 3 months, you guys need to give each other the freedom to ask anything you want to ask. So anything about what happened, I could ask Chris anything about the relationship that he was in for 3 months, and we needed to be honest and open with each other. But once that period was over, it actually might have been more like 30 days, I don't remember. But once that period was over, it's done. And I feel like there was so much freedom in that, because you knew you had the freedom to ask what you needed to ask in that period, but then also knowing this is not going to keep getting brought up. I'm not going to keep throwing this in his face months down the road when something triggers something, because it will, and it did, and it does. It's all, we're, almost 8 years removed now, so things are a lot different than they were. But knowing, yes, we are going to encounter things. There are going to be struggles that still come up, but we both are such different people now than we were then, because God doesn't waste anything, right? He didn't waste the pain in that year in my life. He didn't waste what Chris went through, and he's not the same man that he was even early on, in our first marriage. My
first marriage.
Yeah, and with that reconciliation process, the people that I met that didn't know Chris, they were much more hesitant with the whole process. The pastor of the young adult group that I was going to, when I told him what was happening, he was like, no. Because they didn't know him. And from the outside, anybody that heard what was happening would probably think, okay, this girl does not need to be getting back with this guy. From the outside on paper, it doesn't look so good. But, God, in his mercy, nothing is too far gone for him to redeem. And so it has not been perfect since then, but we feel so much more joy and beauty and freedom in our marriage now that was not existent in our first. And so the gift of reconciliation and redemption that we have gotten is more than just being remarried. God changed our lives and redeemed us individually long before he even redeemed our marriage. And we'll say that was enough. The course that he put me on after going through all of that, that was worth it. Would I want to go through that pain again? Absolutely not. But it was worth it for what he taught me, and seeing and knowing the heart of God more fully than I'd ever known before was worth it.
I love even that you just say the things that you learn, because it's so easy to look at these stories and villainize the husband and you were the victim and basically you just you were there going about your life, and then he got his crap together and came back in and you're like, well, I've been good all along. And I just think there's such a beauty and humility to say God didn't just not waste it with him. He didn't waste it with you either, that he had things to show you. And I love that you brought up the prodigal son story, because that's so, you literally were describing I was wrestling with this older brother syndrome. Meanwhile, my husband is kind of going through this younger brother. If you don't know the story, you should read it. But and in both cases, we're missing the mark, right? Absolutely. And how God and his mercy and grace brought you on very different journeys, but ultimately with the same destination, which is God's I want you closer to me. I want to embrace you, and for there to be nothing, not for there not to be sin in the way, but also for there not to be pride that hinders this relationship. That this is, I want greater intimacy with you. And I just think it's such a beautiful, I love when our stories retell the story that God has told for all of eternity and in scripture. And when you get to kind of see that play out in life now, where you're like, okay, so I get, so he's really redemption. There really is nothing that's too far gone. And when we choose to have faith in that, which you're saying, it doesn't make it easy. It doesn't make it perfect. But just think about if you had chosen what felt like the easier path, which is, you know what, we've already been apart this long. I'm kind of finding my own groove here. The risk is too high. What you could have missed and not stepping into, not just the risk, but the challenge of remarrying and all of those things. And I'm sitting here just grateful that, getting to sit and hear the story played out over the years. I love that. So, thank you for being so open and honest. I love that. I'm so proud of you because you normally tell this story with your husband. We were saying this before, and he's probably more of the talker, and you came on here all by yourself. He's not even.
I don't have my safety net next to me.
He's not, and you rocked it.
Thank you.
You did really well.
That's one funny thing about how God works. If you had known me before, or just anybody really, this is the last thing. Doing music, speaking from stage. We're so blessed to have the opportunity to do music, and we see music as a platform to tell our story and to weave it throughout our music. Don't get me wrong, we absolutely love doing music and can't believe we get to do this for a living. But it all started because of this burden we feel to tell the story of hope and redemption. And so for me, as God so humorously does in the Bible, using people that feel so unprepared, unfit for the roles that he gives them. This is the last thing I would have ever imagined that I would be doing as an introvert who's very comfortable in the background.
Yes.
Leading worship at a women's retreat in front of hundreds of women.
Don't you love hate when God does that?
Right. But how much joy you feel when you do answer the call. But
absolutely,
God uses everything.
Well, if you're up for it, before I let you run and, I don't know, hide in a corner for a while, refill the introverted side, one of the things that we're doing in season 3, I've been calling rapid fire, which only in this moment, in this experience, has been so on point, because there's just been gunshots firing behind us the whole time. So if you're up for it, I don't have a ton, but I have a few kind of rapid fire, get to know you. And what's funny is the first one you talked about from Platform this morning. Yeah. So I kind of know your answer already, but you are not from New England, therefore Dunkin' Donuts is not a thing for you. So
not really.
I'm going to rephrase my question. Because normally it's, if you're going to get coffee, are you Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts? But if you don't have Dunkin' Donuts all around...
They're grown. I mean, we do have Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts in our town.
But they're not like, Tennessee runs on Dunkin's kind of...
No, Starbucks is way more popular.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, if you're grabbing coffee, tea, whatever it is, that's your drink of choice, would you prefer Starbucks or like a local coffee shop?
Local, for sure. We've got some great local coffee places in Nashville.
I was actually thinking that would be true of Nashville. So there you go.
And I'm married to a coffee connoisseur. So I literally, even as a mother, as a teacher, I never drank coffee until like the past year, because it's such a love of Chris's. Like he would make all these espresso drinks. I'm like, I am gonna take on the task of learning to like coffee, because he loves it so much. But I do enjoy
You
coffee.
are so selfless.
So selfless.
Just give and give and give.
I mean, right now I have green tea. I don't have coffee in this cup. But I will drink it.
Just for your husband.
So all that to say, I have learned to appreciate good coffee. No offense to the chains, but we love the good local spots.
Oh, yeah. I don't blame you. So if you're going to have a conversation with a girlfriend, nothing like too heavy or deep, would you prefer to text or call?
As the introverted person I am, I prefer text. But honestly, I am introverted, but I still would prefer the face-to-face. Yes. I don't know what it is about the phone. I don't like talking on the phone.
Me neither. In fact, the majority of people who've answered these have not been phone call people.
Gosh.
Yeah. It's
just
weird.
Awkward. I don't know.
I'm with you. I'm face-to-face or text, the phone call. I'll do a phone call to avoid a conversation that shouldn't be happening over text message. But across the board, I would also much rather sit face-to-face if we need to have a conversation, but that's for another day. So if you're going on a road trip, Stephanie, and you had the choice, would you rather ride or drive?
Ooh, that's hard. I would probably ride.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, because we drive a ton. So we've driven like almost 9,000 miles this summer on our tour.
Goodness.
And Chris is typically the driver. I like not having the responsibility of driving, but sometimes his driving can make me a little nervous. So I don't know. That's a hard one to answer, but probably ride.
I feel like we should dig into these control issues, but I'll move on.
Still, every day is a process, right? The Lord's still working on some things with me.
So, books. I am a book nerd, and I would love to know, what is the last book that you read and really enjoyed?
Oh, man. So, I've been on a fiction kick lately, because we've been on the road a lot. And for me and my introverted self, I have to do a lot of extroverting on the road. So, I never read Harry Potter until my 30s. Yeah. So, I just finished all of the Harry Potter books.
Did you love them?
I really enjoyed them.
My brother and best friend really enjoyed those books. Yeah. I still need to read them. I have not read them yet. True confessions.
And I'm always one that's like, I want to read the book. I don't want to just watch the movie because there's so much more depth and richness.
I have not watched the movies either because I have the same thing. Yeah. I'm like, I can't watch the movies until I've read the books.
Then I have to be like 3 years removed from reading the book, so I forget about all the things they leave out.
That's true. They can't quite do it as good.
Yeah.
So then, speaking of movies, what is the last movie that you saw that you actually paid money to see, whether it was a theater or you just like rented it at home or streamed it at home?
Our entire family were huge fans of The Greatest Showman this past year. So I don't think I've ever seen a movie more than once in a theater, and I saw it 3 times. We loved it so much.
Preach.
Our kids know every word. Soundtrack has been played. It's probably like on our Spotify. It must be hilarious to see what our most played things are, because it'll be like music we like, and then Greatest Showman, and then like Disney tunes, and because our kids have their own playlist they like.
This is not in my rapid fire, though I do love that they've started shooting guns during this. It's very appropriate. What is your favorite Greatest Showman song or scene?
Oh, it's so hard. I feel like it's changed the more I've listened to it, because they all are so special on their own, right? Like the first time hearing Never Enough, I just was a puddle, right? Rewrite the Stars is really powerful. I just love them together. But the very last scene, it's not really music. Well, he does kind of sing it, I guess, at the end. But where they're sitting in the theater watching their daughters do the ballet, and like when he says, "It's here right in front of me," whatever that line, like that's gut-wrenching as a parent for sure.
I'm having all the feels right here now. Thank you, Greatest Showman. Okay, so I added a question, so I'll cut a few and I'll go to the last one. Okay. You ready? If I were to hand you $100 bill, hypothetically, it's not really going to happen, don't get excited, and you could only use it to do something fun, what would you spend the $100 on?
Ooh. I love experiences. I mean, I do love clothes. I love to shop, but it would probably be... It can involve other people, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, Chris and I, we do full-time ministry together, so we're together a lot, and we love it, and what we get to do is just, we pinch ourselves all the time. But, like, Brooke Fraser, actually, she talked about this with her husband, too, how you're side by side, like, towards the same goal, but a lot of times you don't take the time to turn inward. So, like, I think $100, I would love just a fun date night with my husband, because we utilize so much childcare for ministry that we don't take a lot of time to like go out. We do a lot of date nights in because we have a 3 and a 5-year-old, so you know.
That is so cute. Now I wish I had $100 to give you.
But yeah,
somebody send her $100. Send this lady on a date.
Yeah, but we love. I mean, like we have some really fun escape rooms. If you've done any of those things, like just a fun experiential date night.
That's adorable. And for real, if I had $100, you would have just won it right there. Well played, Stephanie. Well played.
Although right now we're like missing our kids, so.
Like, that's true. We travel. Yeah.
They're usually with us, just not this weekend. So.
Well, Stephanie, this has been so wonderful, and thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks for having
me. Okay, so you've met Stephanie. You've heard her story. Here's what I'm going to encourage. You can actually go ahead and look them up on YouTube or find them. A couple of reasons. You should definitely follow them. One is they actually have a video of them kind of sharing their story, which is absolutely worth watching, especially now that you've kind of heard her share it. It would be awesome to kind of put that face to the name. And you can also see videos or listen to recordings of them singing and leading worship, and you will absolutely know what I mean when I say that they are phenomenal at what they do. I appreciated so much Stephanie's willingness to come on and share, and definitely what struck me most in her story, this has kind of been a theme for me lately, not just in these stories on Hey Girl, but also in my own life, is this idea of life showing up different than maybe we had planned out. And I don't necessarily even think that I realized how much I assumed in life. Like, oh, well, you get married, you have kids, and what it'll be like to have toddlers, elementary, middle school, high school, whatever it is in life. I don't realize how many expectations I have until it doesn't show up the way I expected. And then all of a sudden I realize, why am I so upset or like completely devastated? Oh, yeah, because I absolutely had a different expectation of how this was going to be. And hearing Stephanie's story and just that story of, marrying the love of her life, this man who loved the Lord. And we had a story recently about this. And I know that she never saw that coming, but I want to say, even though theirs is not, obviously their story is unique to them, it's not always how these things work themselves out. I would think even on the other side of this, you don't expect to walk through divorce, but then you also don't necessarily expect to end up remarrying the person you walked through divorce in. And just her faithfulness and openness to following Jesus through all of that, and the forgiveness and the grace that God worked out through her and in her life. And I just appreciated so much, not just her story, but her heart and her humility through the whole thing. And I'm just praying for those of you listening. I feel like for whatever reason, the topic of divorce and relationships has come up a lot recently. And I don't know who needs to hear these things. And I do know some of you have written in that God has definitely spoken to your heart and encouraged you and challenged you and all the things through these stories. I'm just continuing to pray that these are things that are connecting with you. I know that there are so many more people than I even realize that God is using, not just Hey Girl, but every single one of these stories. And so I trust again that this is another one of those that He's doing far beyond what I even know or could ask of. And so my prayer today is this, for all of you listening, is an encouragement to just remember whatever it is in your life that you might be facing, that maybe it's not showing up the way that you expected, that God is faithful, that even when we may not see what He's doing, that He's continuing His work. And He's a good God, and we can, in fact, continue to believe in Him and have faith in Him and follow Him. And honestly, like, where else would we go? I've said this before, but I would much rather follow God into places I have no idea what's going on than go anywhere else without Him. And so this is my prayer for myself in this season of my own life where I'm not 100% sure why everything is playing out the way that it is, but I'm choosing to just believe that God is at work, even in the things I don't understand. And I know the same is true for you. So this week, wherever He has you, the work that He's doing in and around you, I am just praying so much for you, even in this moment, that you just remain faithful, keep running your race in your place, and being awesome for Jesus. Thanks for listening.